On July 28, 1970, a missing persons report was filed for 14-year-old Billy Privacy. He'd been gone 3 days. His mother feared something terrible had happened. She did something desperate. She went to the police. They told her not to worry. Billy would turn up. He was a teenager, after all. He might have run away. Those were the words that haunted Helen all those years. Don't worry, he'll turn up. 2 weeks later, another boy disappeared. Timothy again. The cops said, don't worry, he'll turn up. 4 months later, it was 15-year-old Danny Yates. Same thing. Don't worry, he'll turn up. He did. He turned up dead. And suddenly, people in Houston, Texas were paying attention. Dean Arnold Corll was born in 1939 in Dallas, Texas. His father owned a meatpacking company, and his mother came from an old, established, wealthy family. By all accounts, Dean was the golden boy. Smart, handsome, charismatic, he seemed destined for a bright future. But then, strange things started happening. Dean began wetting the bed, failed his classes despite studying hard, and he started having bizarre panic attacks. Doctors had no answers, neither did his parents. To this day, no one knows why Dean's mind fractured, why he did so well at first and then crashed and burned. In 1960, Corll married and moved to Houston. He started working at his father-in-law's candy factory, which specialized in making those little chocolate candies you got with your Halloween costume. Within a few years, he bought out his father-in-law and took full control of the business. The Corll Candy Company became a success. Its advertising slogan, "Where children come first," was plastered on the side of trucks that delivered around Texas. It was an open secret that Dean Corll liked young boys. On more than one occasion, he'd taken underprivileged kids from a boys' club to the movies or bowling. People in town saw nothing wrong with it. Dean was such a respected member of the community. He volunteered at church, served on the board of directors for the Chamber of Commerce. He was on first-name terms with the police. Even the mayor wanted his support. But behind the candy-coated facade, Dean Corll was sick. He had a dark side that terrified him, so he hid it. He buried it, first with alcohol, then with a series of lobotomies. Yes, lobotomies. Dean had 4 of them. That's what we know. Maybe he had more, while people in Houston were putting together jigsaw puzzles of Dean's past, trying to make sense of the nightmare he'd created. One thing became clear. There was no single moment that snapped him. There was no single event that turned Dean Corll into a monster. Instead, there was a gradual and horrifying descent into darkness, a darkness that consumed him completely. And how do I know that? Because he left evidence behind. Not evidence of the killings, but evidence of his mind. As he planned and carried out each abduction, he kept mementos, photographs, clothing, underwear. He saved them all. Became obsessed with keeping secrets hidden. So much so that the only way he could get some sleep was by locking himself in a soundproof room he had installed above his garage. He played white noise, classical music, to drown out the silence. Ironically, those who knew him assumed the music was to drown out the chaos of running a business. Not knowing what Dean was hiding from, though, might have been preferable to what they did discover. By 1970, Dean Corll was living in a large 5-bedroom house on a quiet street. Its walls were covered in photographs of boys. They were smiling, posing. Many were under 14. The walls were also covered in drawings, some of them crude, most disturbing. They showed Dean's victims being tortured, some barely clothed, some with their limbs stretched and contorted, others with their mouths wide open as if screaming. Each picture was titled with the victim's name and the date they would die. At least 33 names were on those walls, yet no one who visited ever noticed. Dean was good at hiding his secrets. It's too good. In fact, people felt comfortable enough to send their children over. He babysat. At first, his victims were older teenagers, runaways, who liked staying at Dean's house because he didn't ask questions. They slept in his spare bedrooms, ate his food, used his phone, and then they vanished without a trace. As the decade wore on, the boys became younger, 8, 9, 10 years old. One victim would later recall seeing a drawing on one of Dean's bedroom walls, showed a boy kneeling on a table, as another forced him to watch as a third was hung upside down. He looked like he was enjoying it. "I think he was supposed to be me," the survivor said. Dean was clever. He chose victims with troubled backgrounds, broken homes, absentee parents, kids who went missing, and no one really cared. The perfect camouflage. He used his status in the community to cover his tracks. He gave the police conflicting stories about where he'd last seen each boy. He claimed that he'd lent them money and that they'd skipped town. He pretended to be worried, devastated, the perfect innocent. For his first few victims, he disposed of the bodies in shallow graves. But eventually, he grew tired of that. Instead, he pulled out the tarps and ropes in his garage and used them to hang his victims. He suspended their lifeless bodies from the rafters above his workspace, from hooks that he used to hang Christmas decorations. He kept them there for hours, sometimes days, until their muscles stiffened and their limbs became easier to manipulate. Then he cut them up, ground them in a giant industrial meat grinder, poured concrete around them, sealed them in plastic, and buried them in a nearby boat shed. His victims didn't stand a chance, yet somehow Dean still wasn't satisfied. He needed more. He needed bigger thrills. So he recruited accomplices, teenagers he could manipulate, abuse, and use. The first was a runaway named David Brooks. Dean promised him a roof over his head, food to eat, money in his pocket. And then he took him shopping, bought him clothes, expensive ones, to replace the rags he'd been wearing. Soon, he was driving Brooks around in a flashy red Corvette. He paid for his education. He found him a girlfriend. He adopted him. That's what people thought. They didn't know Dean had an agenda. He put David up on a pedestal, made him a sort of unofficial foreman at the factory. Then he told him to recruit other boys, specifically ones who reminded him of himself, pale, skinny, bespectacled. Most of the victims were around 13 or 14, and Dean paid the recruiters handsomely. He lavished them with gifts, took them to bars, let them drink and smoke, and he brought them to a house on the same street as his main residence. It was number 25. Hidden cameras had been installed. The furniture was designed to inflict pain. Every surface was covered in pictures of naked boys. In that house, Dean had a special room built. It was soundproof, the walls lined with foam rubber, the door equipped with a peephole and a lock that only he knew how to pick. Inside was a torture board bolted to the floor, the kind used in medieval prisons. Chains and shackles hung from the ceiling. Hooks protruded from the walls, instruments of pain, instruments of death. He lured his victims in with the promise of a party, a beer, a joint, a place where they could be themselves, a place where they could relax. But once inside that room, they were trapped. Dean controlled everything. How much they ate, how much they drank, how much sleep they got, how much pain they endured. He was God in that room. Kay decided when they lived and when they died. Some victims survived for weeks, others only a couple of days. Some were abused and then killed. Others were killed immediately. It didn't matter. None of them made it out alive. The room became a pit of suffering, a place where innocents went to die. After Dean finished with his victims, he ordered his accomplices to dispose of the body. It was a ritual. They dug the holes, wrapped the corpse in plastic, lowered it in, and covered it over. Sometimes they watched Dean do it. Sometimes they were sent away. David Brooks did this almost 30 times. Then it happened. Dean Corll told Brooks to go and get a boy who lived in the apartment across the hall. He was 14 years old. Brooks brought him to the house. Everything was fine at first. They sat and talked. They smoked marijuana. But then Dean slipped a pill into the boy's drink. He passed out, and Dean told Brooks to take him to the back room. That night, Brooks woke up to screams. He ran to the kitchen and found Dean standing next to a bowl. Inside was a liquid. Floating in it was a finger. Brooks froze. That's when he heard Elmer Henley, one of Dean's other accomplices, walk into the room. Dean turned to Brooks, smiled and said, "We're going to start cooking tonight." Brooks ran. He fled to his room, locked the door, pulled the curtains. He didn't come out until morning. Then he walked downstairs, told Dean he wouldn't participate in the killing anymore, and he left. 2 days later, Brooks received a call. It was Henley. He asked Brooks if he wanted to buy some PCP. "I know a guy," he said. Brooks agreed and met Henley at an abandoned house. They smoked the drug. Then Brooks fell asleep. When he woke up, he was tied to a chair. Henley stood over him, holding a gun. "I got you this time, Brooks," he said. And then he shot him twice in the head. But Brooks survived. He managed to crawl to a neighbor's house. When the police arrived, he told them everything. He confessed to helping Dean Corll kill at least 20 boys. The authorities arrested David Brooks and charged him with murder. Dean Corll and Elmer Henley were nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, Brooks's lawyer argued that his confession was coerced, that he'd been under the influence of drugs and alcohol and couldn't remember anything. The judge agreed and acquitted Brooks. Dean Corll was still at large. He continued abducting boys. He continued burying them. He continued smiling. For now, justice had failed. The hunt was on. Do you want to know what happened next? Watch this video here.